G'day, welcome back to my workbench. Now I'm continuing on with the Bounty build here. This is the Revell 110 kit. And I've got a whole pile of things on my bench here. I'm going to show you how to make cloth sails. That'll be fun, okay? But first off, we'll kick off with the swivel cannons, because I actually worked out a way to make them swivel. And they've been a barrel fun. I've also painted in a lot of the blue. I've done a lot of detailing. Oh, look, I could spend hours and hours telling you about the things I've done. But in this video, we'll talk about swivel cannons and we'll talk about how to make cloth sails. I was asked how I made these tiny little cannonettes, or actually they're swivel cannons for the Bounty, because they're like, there's my thumb. They're smaller than a thumbnail. They're tiny little things. And really all I did was clean up the kit part, which wasn't too bad, and drill a hole in there. I think it's a 0.5mm hole. And then I made a little base. Actually, that one's broken, but oh well. The other one's okay. I might have to fix that one. Made a little base for it. So I'll show you how I went about doing that, because it wasn't that hard. It was just a little bit filly. But, you know, if I managed to do it with my wobbly eyes, then you probably could too. Now, the kit parts aren't too bad at all, but they've got holes in the bottom. Now, one of them is so that they can be attached to the swivel point. I'll try and put a pic in the corner there. A swivel point of how they would go on the ship, on the deck there. And the other one, it seems to be an injection hole. So, yes, you'd have to decide where you're going to swivel your cannon, whether it's the back one or the front one. But anyhow, my investigation showed that the centre of gravity would be just behind that little ridge there. So, what I've done with mine is I've made these little brackets. Now, they were in my in the notes I had and the plans I had, and I've made tiny little 1mm by 7mm strips there. And to make the little U-shaped thing is really the simplest thing in the world. I mean, I could have used like a bendy tool, but really I found my tweezers were about the right width for the base. And then if I gently, like obviously that other one there, I'd squeeze it too hard and you snap the plastic. If you gently squeeze it up, because I mean, it's only 1mm wide, and this is only 0.5mm scratch plastic. So, a bit of gentle bend, and you basically got the little part. So there's a little U-shaped part. Okay, it will try and bend out, but that's okay. That's got it started. Now, first thing to do is to drill out the cannon hole. If you don't do that first on, you try and put the swivel sort of U-shape on, well, you end up knocking the whole bloody thing off. Anyway, we'll just do that now. Now, with something like this, well, cannons, as opposed to maybe battleships, modern battleships, the hole isn't that big. It's really less than a third of the width across there, whereas cannons on, barrels on tanks and battleships and sort of thing, it's almost 80%. You've only got a thin edge around there, but cannons you don't. So don't think you have to drill a ginormous hole, because you don't. You don't at all. So we'll just get that reasonably flat, just to work on. And trusty little file. But this is so minute, you don't really want to do too much mucking around. Now, what I first do is I use this. You could use any kind of pointy thing, and I try and find that centre spot. I make a tiny hole, and if I've got it wrong, I can move left, I can move right. You could work it left or right. That could be that way a bit, so I would push the hole a little bit that way, a bit bigger, and I think I've got it. No, I've buggered it up completely on camera. Right, you make another one. Beauty is I'm only making a tiny hole, so I keep going until I've got what I want, and then pushing it in. So this allows me to make all the mistakes now and get that starter hole just right. You probably can't see it, it's so tiny on camera. That finally is the centre. And this is where, here, you don't want those little U-shaped fellas on now, because obviously it's going to be too hard. So, getting out the trusty pin vise. It's just a matter of drawing that out gently. checking the whole time. I'm rotating the cannon barrel, make sure I'm not going skew at any stage. It's not a big bloody hole coming out of the side. And we've only got to go in enough so there's an effect. We're not actually trying to drill out a whole cannon. So there we go, and that's it. That's as big as it needs to be. Now, to finish it off, I just worry it a little bit with the corn hob. Give it another gentle sand, probably even gentler would be better. But you don't want this ending up too big at all. Okay, well that's all we need, and that is just under basically a third, and that's pretty spot on actually for cannon. That's not bad at all. I managed to do one on camera, didn't totally cock it up. All right, now the other thing is there's basically seam lines everywhere, so they will scrape off. They're not too bad. They're fairly easy. So just a nice sharp knife and gentle, because again this part is so small you don't want to be rubbing anything too hard. So they come off, no problems at all. And what I do to check something like this, I use a very fine sandpaper. Well, this is 3M Sponge Ultra. And if I give that a rub now, if I've missed anything, it shows up white. Actually, that one's okay. And there's one there. So it actually shows up white. Like it's kind of useful because you can't really see what you're doing, you know. So that one's done, and that one there should be good. Give it a bit of a sand. But there's a bit of white there. Can you see there's a bit of white there? And that white, although one bit's just a bit of plastic, that white indicates there's a tiny ridge. Easy, done like that. Well, I'll do the other side. I'll do all that, and then we'll glue the U-shape on. Now what I'm going to use here to attach them is Revell Contact Professional. I've actually decanted this into an old Tamiya jar, just so it's easy to use, because I keep breaking the metal. You know, the Revell contactors have a nice little metal applicator that you can put the glue on with. Well, I get breaking the bloody things, so I end up with all these jars of Revell contactor, well, bottles, and can't use them, so I've used an old one of these. It's an old Tamiya thin jar. Now, what we need is, the reason I'm using this is because it's slow setting and allows you a bit of movement. You need that because this is going to be fiddly, and especially with me. So I'll just do one side, get my little U-shaped bracket. I want it to hide those sinkholes, so I'll just pop it on there. And you've got plenty of, the thing is, with the Revell contactor, you have plenty of time to mess around. So what I've got to get is that just right on one side. Now I try to do both sides at once, but the thing would end up springing apart or coming out of shape. And the trick is I want that to be vertical, but maybe a little bit tilted to the back, so the cannon's slightly raised. That'll look a little more authentic. So yeah, I'll need the bit of plastic at the midpoint on the barrel, and with the pin marks on the bottom, that means my midpoint is there. So that's right. So we just wait for that to dry, and then as soon as that's done, I'll do the other side. It's as easy as that. And then basically it's a lot easier if you've got one set and then you can squeeze in the other one. Because I mean, this is tiny. Look at it. This thing's so small. But it's doable, even for someone like me. So there, with one side set, I've put a little bit of the contactor on the other side, and then just holding my tweezers and a bit of pressure. Contactor seems to go off with a little bit of pressure, as do most of your plastic glues. And so there it is. Now I've still got wriggle room because that stuff allows me to basically play around a little bit. So I can straighten that up a bit, get that a bit more the way I want it, and then compress again. And I'll be able to adjust the that pivot. But that's basically it. They'll look fine. They'll be so tiny, and that U shape will be on the bottom that any tiny inaccuracies will hardly be seen. So I'm going to basically paint these black, and then I'll rub them over with gunmetal and get a little bit of a shine on them, and they should look a treat. The swivel guns have now been painted black with Styrese, and then I've dry brushed on them the gunmetal. So even though they're kind of tiny, I mean, I think they've come up rather nice, quite nice at all, and they're looking quite lovely on the model. Got them in. Now, what I found is, if you've seen the last video, I had them dry fitted, well, using my little contact adhesive liquid tape, to the little pins that stuck up, that were part of the moulding of the deck. And they just kept sort of rotating and falling off because they were obviously too heavy and ungainly. So I thought, well, what am I going to do? I need to somehow have them attached, but I can't have them attached so hard that, you know, if I'm working on the model and I bump them, they knock off, right? So, of course, they're swivel cannons. So I went, well, hang on, I'm going about this all the wrong way. What I need is to put a tiny little piece of brass, a little bit of brass tube, underneath my U, and then they'll attach. Now, so I went about doing that. I drilled 0.5mm holes into all of these little pivot points. I cut them down so they were only really a little nub, which actually matched my drawings. They actually show that that's how they should look. And then on that nub, I went in, basically matching the posts underneath, went in and just drilled a basically 3-4mm deep hole with a 0.5mm bit. Then I've used some 0.5mm brass wire, which I've got lying around here, and I use for all kinds of things on this build and other builds. So to get a little bit of brass wire on this U shape, well, first I thought, I'll just drill a little hole in it. You know, I've drilled a hole in the post on the deck. I'll drill a hole here, but that's only 1mm wide, and I need a 0.5mm hole, and there's just very little way my fumbling fingers can do that. And then I thought, well, what if I actually cut a little V in? And that's what I ended up doing. I got my file and I basically just scraped out a little V, because there's not much plastic here, so it doesn't take much to do anything with it. So I scraped out very carefully. I mean, I lined it up, and I've used a triangle shaped file here so that I could get basically just a little V shape cut out of that. That then gave me, and I went through about halfway, and that gave me a little point that I could cement my my wire. So let's do that now, because this one's actually fallen apart. Must have put enough CA glue on it. So I'll just glue this one up now, and then I'll show you how they fit. And what I found with these to actually get them to stick was to, get it a bit tacky there so it just joins, and then let gravity actually let it fall down into place. Because my CA glue takes a little while. To set. So trying to actually hold it in place, I'll be wobbling too much. So I need it vertical and vertical that way, and after a while it will set and lock in, and that's it. So sometimes you don't fight what's going on. So I'm not the steadiest person as well. So if I can get that going. Now I've also made this slightly longer than I needed. I found if you're trying to work with 3mm size pieces of wire, life was really difficult. It was just too bloody hard. So I actually realised I'm better to work with a longer piece, and I'll just cut the excess off. So we'll let that set, and then basically you'll end up with one of these. And I haven't even bothered to paint that bit of brass yet, and I don't know if I will, because the holes are really tight. So I might just paint the top of it, the top bit that's exposed. So these holes are so tight. That's just what I want. In you go. He's in. Bit of coaxing. Oh, there we go. And they'll swivel. Yeah, so that's kind of nice. And the beauty is they're easy enough for me to take off. Taking off is the easy bit. So I can do all the rigging and get all that done, and then I can return my little swivel cannons afterwards, because like anything, if it's poking out, I'm going to knock it off, because that's just how I am. Fumble fingers, I'm guaranteed to do that. Anyhow, that's how it's coming along. Let's get on with something a little more interesting, and that's making sails out of cloth. Now the Revell kit comes with some vac form. It's very thin plastic. Vac form sails, and they're okay. You could use them. They're not too bad. They've got markings on them. They're a bit kind of rough around the edges. You need to sort of straighten them up, and you're stuck with whatever shape that they've decided. But we could do better, and I did do better. So well, the first thing I did was I basically created a paper template of what was on the vac form. Now, you could try and trace over the vac form. It's a bit hard, especially with this one. They're not very accurate. It's actually a lot easier just to measure these up, and it's very fast. And what we're hoping to end up with is something like this. See? It's actually got all the shape. It's got sewn lines through it, and it's made of cloth, and I can still bend it. I can still shape it a bit. And it is, as far as I'm concerned, far superior. It's going to look really lovely. That was my prototype. It had a few problems. It's got a few bumps and everything, and stitches aren't the best. But when I do my final ones, they are going to be perfect. I made a prototype first to test my method, and here's the method. All right, we're going to make sail H, and we're going to copy it off the vac form. Now, you could just lay a bit of paper over and try and trace it, but that is too difficult. It really is. It's not very straight. It's kind of wobbly anyway. It's a lot easier just to measure it. Now, if we measure this up, we only need some basic measurements. We need to know the length of the top here, right, where it would sit against a boom, okay? And that's 54. So we'll write that down. We need to know the width, the widest width at the bottom. Now, that's from the tip of the 2 points. And remember, this thing curves up, so it's a little bit tricky here. So what you need to do is you need to work out what is the actual height of the sail from those tips. And what I do is I just line it up to the 2 tips, and I've made a mark there. And when I measure that, I also get 54. So it's 54 by 54. It's pretty well square, but it goes out at either side. That's okay. We can measure that too. So we need to know what is that distance from that point to that point. And it turns out to be 82. Okay, so that's 82. I'll write that there, that way. And I'll just need to know how far does it come in with the bit that scallops up there. So I need to measure that, and that's 7. Okay, and a final measurement, which I don't really need to do this, but it's just as a check. I'll just check from that point there to that point there. It's about 55, but it varies a little bit. It's an approximate figure. Okay, I'm armed with all my numbers now, and it really isn't that hard to work this out. It really isn't. So, on a nice bit of paper, which I'll line up to my cutting board so that I can get all my measurements. I need the widest side first, right? So I'll turn this round. So I need this wide side here, right, from that point to that point. So I need that one first. And I wrote that down. That was 82. Okay, so 82. Half of that's 41. Okay, I need to know that. That's a very important measurement, that 41. So again, lining up on my board. All right. Now, remember my other 2 measurements here said it was 54 across the boom and also 54 all the way down to that imaginary line. So let's put those in. 54. That gives me where the boom is. Then either side of where the boom is, I need to measure 27. Okay, those of you not good at math, you can use your calculator. 54 divided by 2, unless I've got it wrong today, is 27. So lining up again on my cutting board, so I'll get this absolutely spot on from there to there. So that point, that point, that point, that point. Now I need to know this little scallopy in thing. Well, I've already measured that 7 millimeters. So it's 7. 7 from there. Okay, now one to check is this diagonal now. 55. 55. I've done it. Okay. So now my sail and that, believe me, me, is fast. Now here's the bit that you may not be super good at. I can simply go and freehand draw that because I have done that sort of shit for years and years and years. You may need to find a nice big curvy something or other, like a dinner plate or something, but honestly, you just approximate it with your hand what the curve is, and away you go. Okay. And so now that will be my sail H. Now I cut out that paper template. Let's see if I can find the one I had here before. Oh, that's an E. Here we go. That's an H. Okay. So here it is. and I would cut it out. And then I would test it. I would put it over. That must be I. Well, there you go. If that was the one I cut out, it's horrendously wrong. That's actually the wrong one. So I don't know what I've done with H. Oh, here's H. Here's H for Harry. Right, so then I would put it over there, and the beauty is now I can bend that fairly easily to the shape, and I can check and double check. And you may find at this point, no, it's actually I've made it too long or I've made it too wide. Theoretically, if your measurements are all correct, you'll be spot on. Then you simply transfer all those to your cloth. Once you're absolutely 100% sure that is what you want, you would transfer them and you draw it on your cloth. Now, I've also then had a look at the vac form sale and noticed there are also these additional stitch lines, right? Well, there's all these stitch lines, vertical lines, everything. So I worked out how many there needed to be. Let's see if we can find H on here. Here it is. Here's H for Harry. So I then worked out I needed these. And actually they worked out to be pretty fixed lengths. They ended up being 9. They're always 9. Just about everything I did, they were always 9 high, except for some of the smaller sales. But basically, they're always 9mm apart. And then this way, I think they were just under. Again, they were a 9s, 4.5s. So I measured 9s again. I came up with some easy numbers for me to remember. Okay, so I would have had my centre line already, so I would just measure out 9, 9, 9, 9, and then halve each one of those. You could eyeball it, or you could mark the 4.5s. And then away you go. I marked all of those. Probably a photo here showing you how I did that. And then I gave that to my seamstress, who was very, very happy. Jess was really lovely, and she was very happy to sew them all up for me. Jess has been like a daughter to me. She's a lovely lady. And they're all sewn up. Then the next part of the process, and I'll have to show you photos because I won't do this on camera, is cutting out that sail roughly to size. You cut it a little bit bigger than you need. And then you put it over the vac form. And you mix up a solution of half water, half white PVA wood glue, in my case aqua here, and you rub that on, and then you press and push and shape the thing over the vac form using it as a template. Once that's dry but not fully set but a bit tacky, because if you leave it fully set, the thing might end up actually gluing and setting onto the vac form, then it's a bugger to get it off. Once it's tacky enough and it's starting to hold its shape, you can peel it off and put it aside. And then you let that dry, and see, it's got the shape. So this one should match that one. It does. Okay. And you can always bend it a bit more if you need a little more twist and bend on it. Being cloth, you've got a bit of manoeuvrability. Well, because it's cloth with PVA glue in, right? If it was just cloth, it'd be all floppy. All right? It was just cloth, so it'd be all floppy and you couldn't really do much with it. The reason I have added the PVA white glue, twofold. One, it stops all the edges fraying, because I didn't cut this to its exact shape until after the white glue had set. Okay, that's why I cut slightly larger to put on the vac form to glue it up. Then once it was all set, I could then cut pretty close to those stitch lines. All right. Now, if you don't have someone to stitch for you, you can still sort of do this. You would probably get yourself a really good dark pencil, and you could pencil mark all those in, and they would still probably show. Then you use the same trick again, cut slightly wider, put it on your vac form so you can push it into shape. Once it's set, get in and trim. Now you're going to need some really good scissors. So you may need to go and borrow your partner's, wife's, daughter's, girlfriends, whatever, teachers, basically sewing scissors, dressmaking scissors. That's what I'm trying to say, Harry. Put your brain in. So you'll need that to cut cloth because it's a little bit tricky. And don't tell them that you put all glue on it. They'll probably won't let you do it. Or you have to get yourself a good quality pair of scissors. Or, as I did to make this one, I've lost it already. To get mine, my test one off, I actually used nippers. I actually went and nipped the only way I could get through it, because the cloth is quite tricky to cut anyway. You'd be lucky to use your knife. But anyhow, that's how I've made that test sail, and I've got a whole pile more to make here for next time, and then I'll show you how to sew them onto the yard arms and how to basically, we'll start on the rigging because we have to get some of the running rigging in. Oh, actually the fixed rigging, we need to get that in. because there's a whole process with this, and I don't just put the sails on then rig. No. We basically put the masts in, and then we run what's called standard rigging. And if you've seen Facebook, you probably haven't seen it here. I haven't shown this to you. Although this looks all painted up, right? The only thing really cemented in is the fighting platform and the top masthead there, and the mast sections, right? But my yard arms, watch this. They come off, but then here's magic, okay? They will go back on. And they've still got a little bit of twist and move in them. And it's not just friction for the hole. There's actually a whole method of madness, because this one here, this would never sit by itself. So this one, off, right? And you notice probably there's some white gunk in there, and that is my all-time friend for modelling. Micro liquid tape, okay? This stuff is a contact adhesive. You put it on each part, and you wait for the parts to dry separately, and then you can push them together, and they'll hold in place. There'll be a bit of movement, but they hold in place. Then you can pull them apart, and as you can see there, you can put them back together. So this allows me to pull these off for sewing my sails. Now I think this D sail will be one of these top ones, right? So I'll be able to take that boom off there, and once it's painted the correct colour, I'll be able to sew that sail to that boom off the model, so I'm not going to be bumping and wrecking everything, and I'm going to have that sitting there ready to go. And my standing rigging, which is what I'll do first, doesn't require the yard arms. The standing rigging only holds the mast in place. So the rat lines, the standing rigging, that'll all get done. Once that's done, then we'll sew the sails onto the yard arms, put them in place, and then we do the running rigging, which comes off the sails. Okay, more about that later. Ships are fascinating things, and there's so much fun you can have with them. As you can see, I'm having an absolute ball here with my Bounty. It's really, I've got value for money with this kit, because it wasn't a very expensive kit, but if you've been watching the series, you know how much I've changed it, how many little things I've added, and that's all been an absolute joy to do. All right, well, that's it. I think I've waffled on for long enough. Ask questions, post comments, because I really can't cover everything in a quick video like this. Quick, it's probably about half an hour long already. All I've done is waffled on about swivel cannons and sails. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Comment, like, subscribe to my channel, do all those good things. I'll see you next time, okay? It's goodbye from Australia, and it's hooroo from Harry Hit Eddie.